It's 6 p.m. on a Sunday evening here in Seoul. With your news updates for this hour, I'm Daniel Che. In the economic realm, that's where we start things off. All eyes will be on the Bank of Korea later this week to see whether it will slash the country's growth rate forecasts and the interest rate amid a sluggish global and domestic recovery. But as our Kim Ji-yeon tells us, cutting the rate could actually make things worse.
The Bank of Korea is expected to slash the country's growth rate forecast by up to 0.2 percentage point to 3.8 or 3.9% this Friday. If that happens, it could be a sign that the central bank will lower the nation's key interest rate, which has stayed at 2.5% for more than a year. This comes as major financial institutions like the International Monetary Fund are expected to cut their growth projections for the global economy from the current 3.6%. A move like that would be sure to affect the export-driven Korean economy, which is struggling amid a slow economic recovery in the U.S. and sluggish domestic consumption following the Seoul ferry incident. Korea's mining and manufacturing industry shrank by 2.7% in May from the previous month, the sharpest reduction since December 2008. However, some say cutting the interest rate now could actually send the ominous message about the Korean economy. An analyst from Hanyang Securities told KBS News that the Korean central bank should cut the interest rate at least twice to boost liquidity in the nation's economy. The analyst said that if the Bank of Korea were to cut the interest rate to 2%, the rate during the global financial crisis, it could prompt major participants in the Korean economy to save capital rather than expand their investments. This is the opposite of what the Korean government wants them to do. And this is why the world's top investment banks and local financial institutions think the Bank of Korea will want to keep the interest rate the same until the end of the year. And some, including Barclays and Morgan Stanley, have even predicted the central bank will actually raise the interest rate in the third or fourth quarter. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
The Korean government is likely to increase rice exports to China following Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Seoul last week, as it works to solidify its position on rice market liberalization. The Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs said Sunday that it is working to determine how high the tariffs on rice imports will be when it opens the market. China is currently only allowing some imports of Korean rice, citing a continuation of testing for pest and disease. A former State Department non-proliferation official says the U.S. policy of strategic patience towards North Korea has failed and urges bilateral talks with Pyongyang. In an article for U.S. journal National Interest, Robert Einhorn says the Obama administration's policy on resisting engagement with the North in favor of political and economic pressure has not produced better results than previous policies. He adds that the best way to test whether Pyongyang is willing to limit its nuclear and missile programs is for the two sides to sit down for exploratory discussions. Although China, North Korea's traditional ally, is working to restart the six-party denuclearization talks, Einhorn said direct discussions between Washington and Pyongyang would give the U.S. better insight into the regime's strategic programs and reduce the possibility of further provocations. Speaking of Pyongyang, North Korea has nearly 5,900 cyber warfare personnel, or around 3,000 more than they had 2 years back, according to an unnamed military source. That may not seem like much when compared with the 80,000 cyber operations personnel in the U.S., but put the number of elite hackers side by side, and Pyongyang surpasses Washington, 1,200 to 900. North Korea trains some 100 cyber warriors per year at Medium University, founded back in 1986. And in contrast, South Korea, often the target of such cyber attacks, has only around 400 professionals in its cyber command to guard against such aggressions online. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is planning to appoint a minister in charge of legislative adjustments related to the country's recent decision to reinterpret the constitution. Japanese cabinet members on Tuesday agreed to reinterpret the constitution to enable Japan to exercise its right to collective self-defense. On Sunday, Abe told reporters that the legislative adjustments should cover issues ranging from so-called gray zone incidents or infringements that are not recognized immediately as armed attacks to all matters related to collective self-defense. The new minister will be named during a cabinet reshuffle in September. And the U.S. is calling for an investigation into the beating of a Palestinian-American teenager. The incident follows the escalation of violence that has come in the wake of the murders of Israeli and Palestinian teens and reignited the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Our Connie Kim reports.
This video footage taken during Palestinian demonstrations Thursday appears to show two Israeli policemen ruthlessly kicking and punching a person. The person has been identified as Palestinian-American 15-year-old Tariq Kadir, who was at a demonstration protesting the death of his 16-year-old cousin, Mohammed Abu Kadir, who was abducted by Israelis and killed on Wednesday. Autopsy results have revealed the 16-year-old was burned alive. He is believed to have been the victim of a revenge killing for 3 murdered Israeli teenagers whose bodies were found June 30th. Israeli police say Tariq was among those attacking police officers during the protest. Photos taken of Tariq when he was taken into custody show how brutally the teenager was beaten. His face is severely bruised and swollen.
This boy, 15 years old, he's a dangerous? What, he has in his hand a gun? You found the gun or you found the rock? Why you hit a boy, 15 years old, in this way?
Yes, it did go through my head that he could have been murdered like his cousin.
The U.S. State Department has called for a swift investigation into the incident. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories, Ukrainian government forces have retaken a key rebel stronghold in a major offensive after a 10-day ceasefire broke down. Unable to overcome what they said was overwhelming numerical superiority of the army, pro-Russian separatists abandoned the central stronghold of their 3-month insurgency and relocated to Kramatorsk. The Ukrainian military's capture of Slovyansk is a major victory for the government, which launched an offensive against pro-Russian separatists this week. Troops hoisted the Ukrainian flag over Slovyansk's council building, and officials said soldiers were mopping up the last outposts of rebel resistance. 2 smaller towns were also reported to have been retaken by government troops. Let's move on to some sporting news. 4 teams are so close to lifting the World Cup they can almost reach out and touch it. The World Cup's Final 4 lineup is devoid of Cinderella stories, however. Along the way, teams with higher FIFA rankings weeded out the lower-ranking ones. FIFA ranking number 2 Germany booked their spot first with a 1-0 suppression of France. Lionel Messi finally gets to write a glorious World Cup legacy, befitting of his reputation, leading Argentina to a 1-0 victory over Belgium. Orange Clockwork, as they're known, Team Netherlands sent the last standing dark horse team, Costa Rica, home in a penalty shootout. Brazil crushed Colombia 2-1, but the home team lost their superstar Neymar to a serious spine injury. Many fear the team may not be the same without him. For Colombia's James Rodriguez, although his team is out, he is still in the running towards bagging the Golden Boot award. James leads the pack with 6 goals. Messi and Thomas Müller trails behind, but they may have a hard time finding the net with 2 more matches left. Noise-induced hearing loss is becoming more prevalent, but an effective cure has yet to be developed. Local researchers may have the answer now. Our Kim Min-ji has more.
Lee Chang-gon has worked in an engine room for over 30 years, something that has had a definite effect on his hearing. He complains of his ears ringing and he cannot make out little sounds.
I feel slightly deaf. It also feels like there's something in my ear. I can't hear quiet noises.
He is being diagnosed with noise-induced hearing loss, a condition where cilia inside the ear becomes damaged and cannot pick up sound. And with more and more people listening to music through earphones, the number of younger patients, those from 10 to 19 years of age with a hearing impairment, has jumped nearly 30% in just 5 years. Making matters worse, once the symptoms start, it may be too late.
Noise-induced hearing loss refers to a condition when the functions of the cochlea deteriorate. Once it's damaged, it's hard to recover.
However, local researchers have found that a substance used in asthma medication may help. In this experiment, the researchers exposed a mouse to 112 decibels of noise for 3 hours and observed changes in its cilia. They found that an infectious substance that causes asthma becomes active when exposed to noise and increases the number of enzymes that damage the cilia. The researchers then injected asthma medication into the mouse and found that the damage to the cilia was minimized.
When exposed to noise, an enzyme known as MMP3 is released, and this can lead to hearing loss. The asthma treatment showed a protective response.
When the specific substance is extracted from the asthma treatment, the researchers say it can be made into new medication that can prevent noise-induced hearing loss from worsening. The findings have been published in the U.S. journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Let's move on to weather now. Sunday proved to be another scorcher for most of us residing here in Korea. East of us, Typhoon Noguri is rapidly intensifying as it moves down to the southern Japanese islands, with landfall expected somewhere in Okinawa Prefecture this Wednesday. The direct and indirect impact of the typhoon is expected to be felt in waters off of Jeju-do Island. And now let's take a look at weather conditions elsewhere around the world. And those are the stories we're following at this hour. For more, do join us at 10 p.m. Korea time. Thank you for watching.